started, and when more people join, they join. Don't be scared of the front seats. Hello everyone online. Please forgive me, I've been presenting at a conference all day today, so my voice might be a bit croaky, so yeah, just forgive me. So it is Neurodiversity Celebration Week, so we are going to do a presentation, James and I, and it's going to be focusing on kind of practical things that we can do as a business to help neurodiverse colleagues. Going to have a bit of information and yeah, enjoy. So the talk is called Work-Life Imbalance, Alternative Approaches for a Neurodiverse Office, and I've put neuro in brackets because it's kind of related to the whole office, neurotypical and other types of diversity as well. So what is work-life balance? I think we tend to think about it as a healthy amount of time at work to allow us to have a filling for personal life. And the assumption is that maybe these things don't overlap. And in this diagram, which is not something I created, I found online, as a definition for work-life balance, self is in personal life, but it doesn't appear in professional life, which I thought was a bit unusual. And the typical 9-to-5 day and standard office setup actually often doesn't work for neurodiverse brains because they aren't suited to these structures. And not only does neurodiversity impact our time at work, it also impacts us at home, and then that can therefore have a knock-on effect on work. And we often celebrate neurodiversity, you know, it's a superpower, there are loads of amazing talents and skills and unique qualities that neurodiverse brains have, which we absolutely should celebrate. But I feel like we're maybe missing the point if we just focus on the benefits of neurodiverse brains without understanding and adjusting for the things neurodiverse people find challenging. And really, to get the best out of someone, you have to support the whole of them. So, how can we think about the workplace differently to support our employees to bring their full selves to work? Are there things that we can adjust in the traditional workplace structures that allow all employees to thrive? And these things can help neurodiverse colleagues and non-neurodiverse colleagues. So I'm going to see if this works. But obviously we can't have 500 different systems for 500 different people because that would be chaos. And of course, an organisation needs to function commercially, support everyone in the business, engage with stakeholders, and provide a service or product. But small adjustments can make a big difference. So in this presentation, we're going to talk through some workplace challenges that neurodiverse brains and people have, and small changes that we can make as neurodiverse individuals and as colleagues, whether that's a manager, a peer, a direct report. Now, what we're going to go through is not exhaustive, but hopefully it's kind of bite-sized chunks of information that you can take away, think about, and maybe action easily. We will also signpost to more resources if you wanted to find out more afterwards. So I think we tend to think of things in a particular way. So we often think about the neurodivergent, kind of creative, chaotic mind, compared to the neurotypical, which is kind of stable and reliable. But I kind of started thinking about this in a slightly different way. So when we're talking about adjustments, we are probably thinking about a neurodiverse person who has disclosed their neurodiversity and they're probably not masking as much. And I'll talk about masking a little bit more later. And then you've got the neurotypical person who has absolutely no additional needs in the workplace. But I actually think it's a bit different to this. You've got neurodiverse people who have disclosed it publicly and are not masking. They have disclosed it, but they're heavily masking. Some people will be neurodiverse, but they haven't disclosed it publicly. And some people are neurodiverse and they're not even aware themselves. And I'd just be kind of conscious that a lot of people don't, if they are masking or not disclosing in the office, that might be because they feel that it's going to impact them at work, it's going to impact their career progression or how people see them at work, and obviously that's something today that we want to kind of prevent from happening. And I also actually think there are very few people who have no needs at all, neurodiverse or neurotypical. Some neurotypical people will have additional needs which are obvious, and some will have additional needs that aren't disclosed. You know, we all have things going on in our lives that can affect us, whether that's grief, or we're a carer, or we've got an ill relative, or, you know, and I think we just have to be conscious that I actually think very few people have no needs that when they come to the workplace. So, instead of having neurodiverse and neurotypical brains, we're going to talk about, as I said, some challenges that neurodiverse people have, how we can support them and ourselves, and also I think keep in mind when we're going through them that some of these actually could help everyone. So I just want to start with a bit of neurodiversity misinformation. This slide is referring to ADHD, but I think it's kind of interchangeable. You've probably heard some of these sayings in relation to autism, dyslexia, and so on. So just to kind of myth bust some of those, spectrum conditions like autism and ADHD, people tend to think it's a linear spectrum, so someone is less autistic or less ADHD to more autistic. And I think this is where the kind of phrase, we're all a little bit ADHD, kind of comes in, but actually spectrum disorders are more of a pie chart, with each segment kind of referring to a different part, and the sort of the levels of that spectrum, each segment will change for each individual. So it actually might look something more like this, and I think it's, again, important to remember that not all of these segments are going to represent something that's outwardly obvious. So if it's something like abnormal posture, yes, that might be obvious, like someone walking on their tiptoes. But some things will be less obvious, like sensitivity or depression. And I think it is, this will make sense in a minute, I think it is true to say that there are aspects of neurotypical, neurodiverse experiences that neurotypical people do experience, like anxiety or noise sensitivity. But I'd like to use this example. Everyone needs to go to the toilet, and probably you're going to the toilet and having a wee a few times a day, let's say 4. But if you're going to the toilet lots of times a day, there's a problem. So it's just kind of like sort of using that analogy to say, yes, neurotypical people do experience things that neurodiverse people do, but for neurodiverse people, that is impacting them all the time. So, if you remember my presentation from last time, I do like to throw a few memes in there. So just there are a few in here. So, definition of neurodivergent masking. It refers to the practice of concealing or suppressing aspects of one's neurodivergent traits in order to fit in with the norms of the workplace or society. And actually, masking can be super detrimental, and some of the impacts of masking include late or misdiagnosis, burnout, anxiety, depression, substance use, low self-esteem, feelings of isolation and loneliness, and suicidality. So I think it's, again, important that we allow people to feel they can bring themselves to work as their whole selves and ask for help and be supported in the workplace. Another thing that I want to touch on is executive functioning, and I think we often assume some of the traits of neurodiversity, so dyslexic people can't spell, ADHD people can't sit still, dyspraxic people are clumsy, but actually for neurodiverse people, executive functioning is something that is really is really impactful, and a lot of these things are hidden and impact how we are in the workplace. So these 8 parts or factors of executive functioning are impulse control, emotional control, flexible thinking, working memory, self-monitoring, planning and prioritising, task initiation and organisation. And before we get into some of the more specific examples, I just want to, this actually popped up on my Instagram last week. It's an interview with the actress Constance Wu, and she's actually talking about a different workplace experience. But the top part of this quote, I think, is, I guess, sums up kind of the point I'm trying to make, is I think it's important that we engage in curiosity and empathy before we go straight to judgment. And she's saying, because if someone does something out of character, it usually means something's going on in their life. And I've kind of adapted it to say, because if somebody does something different to what you as a manager, a peer, a direct report might expect in a workplace situation, it might mean something's going on. So, also, if you remember last time, I like to include a picture of my dog. So this is Rufio, and he's small, so he's going to tee up some of the small adjustments that we can make. So, stimming is something you might have heard about. The term stimming is short for self-stimulating behaviours, and it refers to repetitive or ritualistic movements or sounds that help an individual self-soothe when stressed or otherwise cope with their emotions. And again, as a neurotypical person, an example of this might be biting your nails when you're nervous. But for neurodiverse people, it's something that happens a lot, and in some situations and some examples, feel or actually can be socially unacceptable. The root cause of stimming can differ depending on the neurodivergent conditions. So for example, for ADHD, stimming is often tied to attention and impulse control, while for an autistic person, it might be more about sensory regulation and emotional coping. And there are actually lots of different types. There's visual, related to things that we can see, tactile, auditory, olfactory, to do with smell, gustatory, to do with taste. This word is really going to get me because I'm dyslexic. Proprioceptive, yes, nailed it, which is related to body position and movement in surroundings, and vestibular, which is body movement in relation to balance. So some examples of this are hair twirling, skin picking, hand flapping, bouncing your leg or foot, listening to the same song repeatedly, and when I say repeatedly, I mean like literally the same song for the entire day, repeating words or sounds, humming, singing, blinking, pacing, cracking joints, walking on tiptoes, staring at lights or moving objects, chewing inedible items. So that's really like, not even the full list, but that's some of just a few examples. And in terms of small adjustments, so for individuals, I really encourage you, if you are stimming, try not to be embarrassed. Identify your triggers, observe the environment, and if the stimming is harmful to yourself or those around you, try and find alternative sensory experience that meet the same needs. So this is where you probably would have seen fidget toys, something like this that you can kind of fiddle with in a meeting or at work, and that can really help kind of with an alternative activity. And for colleagues, don't judge, don't stare, don't block non-harmful stims, because if they aren't disruptive or harmful to that person, try not to interrupt it. Check in with that person, see if they're, are they doing okay? Like, maybe they're feeling a bit overstimulated and they need a break. So just check in, observe and understand. And if a stim is socially disruptive, so rather than harmful, but it's creating a noise in the office or it's disruptive socially, just be kind when you approach that person and just kindly ask them to, if they could, check in with them, see if they need a break, but just let them know kindly that it might be a bit disruptive. So, environment. This is obviously not our office, but environments can be, especially open plan offices that we're all used to now, can be really overwhelming. And a lot of people might find it kind of sensorily overwhelming. So some tips for that. a really easy one that you can do in your teams is actually just think about where in your teams you're sitting. So for example, somewhere kind of near the gangway or near a kitchen where there's loads of smells and loads of people walking past, and can be really not a great spot, but maybe kind of sitting away from the gangway, or actually maybe sitting right in the middle of loads of people chatting is really distracting. So maybe sitting in a corner or facing the wall, or kind of somewhere a bit off to the side where you can have a bit of just sort of a bit of sensory break. Something in our office that we have is a quiet room. So this is actually the 3rd floor, and we have a quiet room on the 3rd floor, which I would definitely say is like a really good example if you need a break or to work in a quieter location for a bit. And just to reference, when I'm going through all of these, I'm not calling out specific neurodiverse conditions. These are kind of generalists. So if you want to find out more information about a particular condition, we can give you more information, but just to let you know it's sort of general. Noise cancelling headphones or the loop in ear earplugs. These can be really helpful for neurodivergent colleagues and help them to sort of with the noise and distractions. So this is actually maybe a bit of a surprising one, but actually in the environment, our desks themselves can actually be a bit tricky. And I know for me, I sit in all sorts of funny positions, and the reasons for that is sometimes it's sensory stimulation or sensory overload. Sometimes you need to move, and that movement helps with focus. For some people it's to do with motor skills, so it's actually challenging to maintain a certain posture for a long time. And there have been some studies that suggest a relationship between neurodivergent people and hypermobility. So they will naturally kind of sit in sort of very twisted, like sit on their leg, and actually the long-term impact is quite, it can lead to sort of bone problems and that kind of thing. So that's some of the reasons why that might happen. So again, some small adjustments. Check that your office and your home desk is set up and suited to you in a safe and comfortable way. Your desk chairs, the AHMM office chair, there's actually an ergonomic guide on Kite. So check that, make sure it's set up for you, your height, your positioning. There are also other types of chairs that meet these needs, like wobble stools, kneeling chairs. You might see those big exercise balls that people sit on, and chairs that you can kind of roll around in and put your legs in different positions, and also making sure your desk height is correct. And some people might even have a sit-stand desk to help with that movement. Those of you in my team will recognise this. For a lot of people, workplace disruptions are really disruptive. So for some people, that's because when you break focus, it's kind of hard to get back on track. But also, if you've got kind of different processing times, if someone just pops up to your desk, you might feel a bit unprepared and need more time to process a request and respond, rather than someone just kind of popping up and expecting an answer. For some people, small talk and social situations are more challenging. Things like eye contact, that kind of thing can be really tricky. And obviously, being in an office is fantastic. You can have those organic conversations, it sort of sparks creativity and idea sharing and builds relationships, but just be conscious that some people might prefer to participate in those things away from their desk. And one thing you can do that's really helpful is turn off notifications on your, as a neurodivergent person, turn off your notifications on your Teams and emails on your phone. You can also set your Teams to say do not disturb, and you can actually set a status message. So you could say, I'm in focus time for 2 hours, and if you see that on someone's Teams, just respect it and maybe drop them a Teams message. They'll pick it up when they're back online, and then you can come and talk to them at a different time. Also, one thing that hopefully we can do is talk to each other in person, and so maybe say to your next door desk neighbour, hey, I need to focus for a bit. Would you mind just not chatting to me for a couple of hours or not interrupting me? And if someone does ask you that, just, take that with kindness and just respect that and just try and be a good colleague and to help them with that thing. So, daily routines, another big one. Obviously, be awesome, but some of the challenges that neurodiverse people can have is around lateness and timekeeping, concentration at different times of the day, needing breaks at different times or more frequently, forgetting commitments even if they are in the diary. I'm guilty of that one. And executive functioning, some of the things that I mentioned earlier really play into this. So again, one of the great things that we have at HMM is the ability to do core hours, which can be really, really helpful. So for me, I know that I can use this and work at better times while still, being at, you can still work with your colleagues most of the day, but you get a bit of flexibility. In terms of extra breaks, and there's lots of ways to do this. This is something called the Pomodoro technique, where it's like an egg timer, but they've obviously, whoever invented this it was a tomato timer. But the principle is that you work for 25 minutes, take a short 5-minute break, do that 4 times, and then take a longer 15 to 30 minute break, and that can really help with focus and concentration. And then in terms of working from home, so one of the things that I would just mention in terms of working from home is that sometimes people might want to have their video off on a Teams call, and if someone does, I would try if possible to not pressure them to put their camera on. And there's a number of reasons why a neurodiverse person might feel uncomfortable, because, for example, if they're working from home, they might have the sensory experience that their work desk is no longer the best place for them to focus. So they might be sitting on their sofa, or they might be sitting on their bed to work. Executive dysfunction might mean that that person has struggled to shower or brush their hair or brush their teeth that day. Sensory sensitivity might mean that their clothes just feel so uncomfortable, and the only way that they can concentrate is to wear clothes that might look like pajamas to someone else, even though they're not. And so someone might feel embarrassed or unprofessional, but they're still able to do their job, but they might just feel a bit more comfortable to have their their screen off. So, time management. Big one again. And I think time management is one where line managers can really help an individual. Some of the challenges that someone might have who's neurodiverse is time perception, so losing track of time, organisation, prioritising tasks, forgetfulness, impulsivity and taking on too much, procrastination and being unable to start, hyper-focusing and sometimes on the wrong things. Unclear deadlines means that they're not able to manage their time. They might have different processing times, and they're not allowing themselves enough time to digest information before doing the work. And this can all lead to obviously quite a lot of anxiety and stress. So if you are working with someone as a line manager or a colleague, help by giving deadlines, help with prioritization. So what are the tasks that person needs to do? Can you set them a clear deadline? And what is the priority for the day or the week? And another one is building in extra time for processing information. So if you need to give someone a document to digest, a big document, just ensure that they have enough time to digest that before they're expected to go to a meeting or do a particular piece of work. At the end of things, meetings, if they can be 45 minutes instead of an hour, that allows people to do some processing after the meeting, take 15 minutes to process everything, write their actions, and then go to their next meeting or next bit of work on the hour. Schedule breaks and observe when people work best and schedule things around that. And check in again. So one of the things that can be really useful is, if you don't already do it, have regular check-ins with your line manager to make sure you are on track. And it's totally okay to ask for that, no matter what level of seniority you are in the business or what part of the business you work for. ask for that check-in or accommodate that check-in. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's 2 or 3 times a week. And that can just really help with all of the things we've just mentioned. And I think the biggest one is communication. And I kind of like this because you actually can't tell which side is a neurodivergent person and which side is a neurotypical person, because it could be either way. But some of the challenges with communication are, and this again covers all sorts of different conditions: directness, literal interpretation, noise sensitivity, having super focused interests, repetitive patterns, emotional regulation, interrupting, not understanding non-verbal cues, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, preference for written communication, difficulty with eye contact, need for clarity and structure, variable processing time, and different interpretations of social norms. So, some small adjustments. Make sure that your communication is clear and concise. If you're a neurodiverse person and you can articulate how you prefer to communicate, do try. Or if you're a team member or a colleague, maybe ask how someone prefers to communicate. Sometimes people prefer written or verbal instructions, but actually sometimes people prefer both. So if you give someone instructions, check if, oh, do I need to follow this up with an email or a Teams message, just to run over what we've agreed and discussed. One sec. Give advance warning. So if there are advance warning of any changes that are coming up, sometimes that can be really discombobulating for a neurodiverse person, so make sure that they've got enough warning about changes, but also again providing relevant documents in advance for people who have different processing times. So in terms of AHMM ourselves, we have just this week launched our neurodiversity policy, and there are some examples, copies on the chairs, and it's a really great document. It goes through some key definitions, so it's a really useful thing that sort of outlines different conditions, different definitions, and it talks about employer and employee responsibilities. It includes some processes around making workplace adjustments, asking for them and accommodating them. It includes links to further information, so if you want to this is the signpost basically to the further information, loads of really great websites and forums. It gives specific information about line managers, so guidance for line managers, and it also includes a self-assessment form, which James is going to talk about a bit more, but it's a really helpful template to help neurodiverse individuals communicate and formalise with their line manager how your neurodiversity shows up on good and bad days, and any adjustments you might need. We're also going to be launching a call for neurodiversity champions in the office. So if you are neurodiverse or have experience of neurodiverse colleagues, so you're a line manager or a colleague of a neurodiverse person or team, we will be sending out information about how you can get involved with that. There's also tons of stuff on Kite, which is really bite-sized videos. So on the People Skills portal, if you go scroll down this bit on the side, there's a whole section on neurodiversity. There's loads of videos. So take a couple of minutes if you want to learn a bit more. That's a really great resource. So our office is doing loads of great things that we can tap into. And as I say, hopefully these are small, bite-sized things that you can take away and action easily. And there are two things that I wanted to touch on in the neurodiversity policy, particularly, which I think really kind of summarise the. Oh, one more thing. I hope you all were able to come to the in rehearsal talk earlier this week, but we also have a vitality event in April that you can log into online about neurodiversity. So back to where I was. This is something that's written in the policy, and I think it's just a really good kind of thing to remember. And also, it says underneath this in the policy, don't underestimate the courage it takes for someone to open up about their neurodivergence. And so, hopefully, by talking about things, celebrating it, talking about challenges, and celebrating Neurodiversity Week, we can create a safe space where everyone can be who they are and bring their whole selves to work and support each other to all thrive. So that's it, that's me. I'm going to hand over to James. I think that's all my slides.
Wow. Thank you, Laura. That was as amazing as you always are. It really was. The thing that was really important to me was I just want to kind of show somebody what I wish I had known 10 years ago. So that's this part of the presentation, and then I'll move on to something else. So 10 years ago, I found out my daughter was diagnosed with dyspraxia, and I was like, oh, what's that? I had no idea. I was a typical middle-aged man, and so I bought a book on Amazon, which I later found was on 28th of November 2015, and I handed it to my daughter, as a loving father does, and that was the end of it. And about 5 years later, I kind of picked up the book because I'd run out of anything to read, and recognised that the person being described in the book was me. So that started me on a journey where I started scrolling through Instagram, and this person in particular, but a few others as well. Again, I was like, oh, this does sound like me. And trust is a big thing to do with neurodiversity. And I was on a run with Andrew Thomas, and I trust Andrew, and runs are good. Pump up the Wednesday run group, you get lots of endorphins, you feel like you can trust somebody, and so I had a chat for the first time with somebody about what dyspraxia went, and that went well, and we sat down properly, and that was really helpful. And there are hundreds of these free online tests. I encourage you to do them. They're actually all right. You know, there's not that much difference between the free online version. So on the train home today, or when you're sitting with somebody watching a movie that you don't really want to watch, why not download a free test and just go through it? They really are quite fun, and you never know what you'll come out with. And at the end of the day, this was quite helpful. So I just started writing down my own self-diagnosis. And it's really, life is, I think, very much about what understanding ourselves, you know, and hopefully as we get older, we can understand ourselves a bit better. And so I went through this, and then I said to Hazel, who I trust is a big thing, and I said, Hazel, can we sit down for half an hour? And I said, can I just talk at you for 15 minutes? And she just sat there, and I just went through all of this and the effect, which is, you know, my self-diagnosis and where I was, and what the effect that had on me. And that was great. She just sat and listened. And at the end of it, you know, the effects it has on me on work, on a few things, she said, oh really, is that it? Yeah, which was sort of really encouraging, and in a good way. Like, you know, like I thought, you know, is this going to be the end of me doing my job and being a project architect and all those kind of things that are important to me? And it's like, no, of course we can work on those things. So trust is a big thing. And then with ADHD, there's two routes to diagnosis, and I can only speak about ADHD and a bit about dyspraxia. I don't know anything, and I only really know about how ADHD affects me. So if you consider, or you think, or you're interested in something else, there's a limit to what I can help. But there's two ways you can go. You can go down a private company, which is quick, or you can go down your NHS and the GP. So I spent a few months going down the private companies, and it's a lot of money, and I try to find different ways of doing that, trying to find some funding, and and actually I found out that probably not just for financial reasons, the NHS GP route is probably a better one for me as well, and I can explain that if anybody wants to know. So instead, I just go onto the NHS portal, and you submit a form, very quick, and instantly you get this is your form, which I submitted on the 20th of February 2024, and it's bang, 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 bang. That was easy, really easy. I was shocked. You know, NHS, some things are hard, but this was not hard. And then, I had a phone call with my GP. Didn't even have to go in and see him. And just a few days later, and he got me to fill in another form before that, which was quite long. You have to, if you want to go down this route, you do have to love filling in questionnaires. You will fill in many, many very lengthy questionnaires, and you'll have to get other people to fill in questionnaires as well. But if you're okay with that, it's not a bad route, and you do find out something. So they then went on to the NHS puts you onto this Psychiatry UK thing, which, well, they say it's going to be 3 or 4 months. It's not. It's going to be longer than that, but that's okay. Or you can just stick the NHS, which they say is going to be 3 to 4 years, but it'll probably be longer than that. So I would recommend this route. But, and with the Psychiatry UK, you then do a very, very long questionnaire, and you then get somebody else close to you, or 2 people, my wife and my daughter both filled in very long questionnaires about me as well. And that was on the 14th of March 2024. And then you wait. And you know, even though I'd filled in lots of questionnaires, and including one of those things is the World Health Organization questionnaire, which, you know, my GP confirmed that yes, you do tally. Still, you feel a bit like, am I a fraud? You know, is this real? Is this genuine? Is this, you know? And then why am I doing this anyway? And then, you know, you go through all of these kind of self-doubting things, and then 11 months later, I was sent another questionnaire, and after filling that one in, on 19th of February 2025, so just a month ago, I had an hour-long conversation, a bit more, with a psychiatrist. And I gotta say, it was a really positive experience for me. He did confirm that the pass mark for ADHD is 42%, and I scored 73%, so I passed. And I passed on both the attention deficit side. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And you can be either attention deficit, so I passed that, or you can be hyperactive, and I passed that as well. So I feel like I've qualified in something. But it was a very positive conversation, and I've got to say that speaking to a psychiatrist, interesting. But it gave me lots of insights, and if anybody's interested in setting out on this journey, I recommend it, and I'm sure we're very happy to talk to people about that. And then the policy. It's been a massive project. It really has. It's and we had a team of AHMMers and HMR, working together to edit it and write it. And Kristen, Amy, Zipu, Laura, others. And it went up to Peter and the executive directors, and it's been refined. And you know what? It's been improved massively. You know, the thing that we worked on, it's much, much better than that. And I really thank them. I really want to thank Kristen Barnes in particular, because I feel like she has kind of led and guided our slightly chaotic input at many, and kind of brought this thing into kept on bringing it into place every step. So a big thank you to everybody who worked on that. It is amazing. And I'm pretty sure that we are the first architectural company, certainly in the UK, that has a neurodiversity policy. So that's something which I really hope, in a world where all kinds of diversity is under attack from every side, is something that, whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical or don't know, something to be proud of, the fact that we are, making a stand and supporting people in a different form of diversity. So thank you for that. There are printed copies. I did want to bring up about the last page of that, which is this reasonable adjustment. So this is a self-assessment. This is me on the left, and you fill in this form. It's very much the same conversation I had with Hazel about a year ago. So for me, being in the office 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 9 till 6 is not a problem. That's not difficult for me. The hyperactivity side is I work in a very focused section, but the attention deficit side is that at the end of a hyperactivity period, I am mentally distracted and exhausted. So big, long meetings. The Christmas party is a nightmare for me. An all-day workshop. After a couple of hours, I just need to take a break, a solo break, like not standing in a room drinking a cup of tea, but going off for a walk on my own, or pretending to make a phone call when I'm actually just sitting on my own. that's the kind of thing. So you know, I, like you, love the idea of the Frank Lloyd Wright Johnson Wax building, and I used to work here, and that was a very difficult space indeed for me to work. I quite enjoyed working there, but not the space. And now I have this space. So this is one of the things, my reasonable adjustments. I have the quietest spot, you know, as Laura was talking about, in Hazel's team. I sit next to the PPE equipment in the corner, and I'm really happy there. It's just great because it just works for me. You know, things like, oh yeah, so this is the quiet room. So I kind of hate telling you about it because it's such a great place for me to go to. But I will generally go here at least once a day for about 15 minutes, or I might go up on the roof and I'm just sit there, no screens, nothing. I just have to let my brain just decant down. That's how it works for me. And then I'm okay again, you know. And you know, other things work for me. It helps me to write everything down. People who know me know I love OneNote, and I will sit in a meeting with a laptop and I will write as it. I just process much better. So if I'm on I had somebody come up to me on site yesterday saying, what, you know, and as they were talking to me, I was writing this, and they're saying, you're distracted. And I said, no, I'm writing down what you say because that's the only way I process. But I had to explain it to them. And headphones, you know, noise cancelling headphones, they are awesome. I do think they're fantastic. Oh, whoops. Yeah, not necessarily these ones. So that's all great. There is some work left to be done. I'll touch on a couple of things. I was asked to be on a panel of 7 neurodiversity experts a few months ago, and I turned up to this thing, and I realised that 6 of the people on the panel were neurotypicals, and I was the one neurodiverse. And I thought, I really struggled. I thought, how would we feel if we went to a presentation on the gender pay gap, and there were 6 men experts up there and 1 woman? That's kind of how I felt. It's just like, there's an issue there, I think, you know. I'm part of this neurodiverse architecture network, which is great. It's a kind of neurodiverse architects across the whole of the UK and elsewhere. I would say the vast majority of neurodiverse architects are not yet willing to come out as neurodiverse because they think it would be detrimental to their careers. So that's an area to work on, and this is kind of a strength we have here, that, you know, that we begin to get that way. And you know, I consider this and you to be a safe space, which is a real testament to the ethos of AHMM. It's not everywhere. It's not even, it's very few places like that. But I did have an opportunity on the construction site this week where I could have brought up about being neurodiverse, and I thought, actually, you know what, I don't feel safe to do that. And, you know, so there's work to be done. And lastly, as a 56-year-old guy, I've chosen to disclose to some of my closest friends, and I'm talking about people outside of AHMM here, nobody inside, but 3 of them responded in almost identical words. You don't believe that nonsense, do you? And these are good friends of mine, you know, talking about me kind of summoning up the courage to be open about this thing, which is really important to me. So I would say, if that's how you feel, and I don't think any of you do, but if you do feel that way, please don't say it to me, because it does actually does upset me in quite a big way. So there is work to be done, and that's why, you know, we are a call for neurodiversity champions. So we are an incredibly supportive company, and one thing we can do is to, you know, identify, provide training opportunities for neurodiversity champions. So most of those, I suspect, should identify as neurodiversity, but also if you're very, doesn't mean you have to completed your diagnosis. You know, that's not important, I would say, you know. But also if you're a very close supporter of someone who's neurodiverse also. So please speak to Kristen, Laura, and myself about that. And you know, it'd be great if next year it's not Laura and myself. You know, maybe it's Laura, but you know, it'd be good to have some other neurodiverse champions up here speaking. And we also don't want to just make neurodiversity something we do once a year. That is great, but you know, in June this year. We want to have do something. We're talking about doing something about how we design buildings for neurodiversity. There is a PAS out there for that. I recently worked with Mark to put a presentation for Paul to a client who wanted just that. So let's make neurodiversity a much bigger thing of what we do, both as a company internally and supporting each other, but also in the buildings we do as well. Thank you very much. We'd love to have some questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. You mentioned, Laura, about depression and anxiety. Do you consider that a neurodivergent feature?
I wouldn't, if someone, so the question was around anxiety and depression, if that's a feature of neurodiversity. I don't think anxiety and depression as a clinical diagnosis is the same thing, but it can be a symptom of, it can be an experience that someone has from having a neurodiverse condition. So that could be because they're heavily masking and it really impacts them to the point where it causes anxiety and depression, or it could be social pressures that cause that, or stressors. So if they're in a situation and they're unable to cope, that can cause anxiety. But anxiety and depression can be separate to neurodiversity and be independent of that as diagnosed things. I think one of the things that often happens for people who have late diagnosis is they get misdiagnosed with anxiety or depression when actually there's a bigger thing going on, which is the neurodiversity, and then the anxiety and depression is part of that. So yeah, hope that answers the question. Any other questions? Everyone's got shy now.
Great.
Cool. Well, if there's no questions, we are going to be here for a few minutes. So if you want to come up and talk to us privately, we're here for a few more minutes. But thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being a part of this.